All right, TC is here with me. He decided he wanted to be on this to make sure we put a bookend on the full gloat fest as we bring in our guest Edoardo Molinari. TC, I'll let you have the floor here to start if you guys want to have a little celebration of some kind as we go to kick this off. I believe I've eaten as much of my words as I possibly can, but I'm always happy to revisit.
Listen, you gotta win with class, and that's why we're bringing Eduardo on because I certainly can't win with class, and kind of someone who I think has had a outsized impact on the European success. Eduardo, all the other captains said some of your statistical analysis and strategy and everything was a big key to success, a big key to putting the whole team together. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you, TC, and thanks, Soly, for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Now, you're too kind. I think, I obviously helped a little bit, but I have to say that Luke was MVP, I think, of the week. He was unbelievable from the first day he got the job all the way to Monday morning when we left Rome back home. He was incredible, and obviously the players were, some of them were really outstanding, and but we'll talk about it. Yeah.
So some people on this podcast, not going to name any names, may have said some things after Whistling Straits, such as the U.S. is set up for a decade of dominance. Listen, privately, some of the members of the European team may have voiced some similar concerns. But at what point for you did the momentum shift, or when did it start to crystallize that Europe was going to have a great chance to not only just beat the Americans in Rome, but also beat them pretty soundly?
Well, I would say sometime after the Masters this year, it's where things started to change dramatically. Like I was always keeping an eye not only on my numbers but like on data golf at the live prediction. And I think beginning of March we basically had very little chance. I think it was like a 65% US and 20 something Europe, 25, 30, maybe less than 30% Europe. And then all of a sudden this chances started to shrink. But more than that, it was like we had John winning the Masters, we had Fitzy winning the week after, then Victor caught fire in the summer, and all of a sudden we thought, oh, here, we might have a chance. And I think some of the players from Europe. I mean, it happens every 4 years. I don't know why, it's difficult to explain, but like anytime there's a Ryder Cup in Europe, there's always some European players that catches fire in the summer and starts to play really well. Like it happened in Paris with Francesco. It happened this time with obviously Victor had the best summer of his life so far. Um, I don't know. There's something different, and even a small thing that happened. When Victor won BMW, I text him literally 10 minutes after he won, just because I work with him as well privately. So I just text him saying, "Well done, congratulations," and he replied after an hour, and all he said was, "Rome is going to be so much fun." Like he just won the biggest event of his career and he's already thinking about Rome. He just doesn't give a shit about BMW, about the FedEx, about the playoffs. He just wanted to be part of a winning Ryder Cup team, and I think that says a lot.
Was it about getting paid for the Ryder Cup? Was that what he was messaging about? I'm sure that's what it was.
No, we have none of that. Actually, I think I would say I don't know exactly what happened on the US side, but I would say 12 out of 12 guys in our team would happily pay a lot of money to be part of. And on that topic, I mean, we had obviously Olazabal as one of the vice captains, and Olazabal basically lives and dies for the Ryder Cup. And he was telling us some savvy stories at night one evening, and then eventually he almost started crying. And we said, Jose, what's wrong? And he said, well, you guys don't realize how much this means to me, because he said, I would happily give one major back to be able to play in one more Ryder Cup. And we were like, huh? Say that again? And he said, yeah, yeah, I would very happily give a major back to play one more Ryder Cup. And he's like, this is how much it means to him. So it's, yeah, special.
gosh, if this keeps accumulating, I'm gonna end up flipping to Europe, like rooting for Europe. Like
Come on over,
I
man.
can't like
Water's warm.
it's a mountain, a mountain of evidence
Yeah.
that's getting in at this point. TC.
Uh, Going back to kind of the lead up to this Ryder Cup, like with Henrik losing the captaincy, Luke getting named the captain. Were you an assistant captain from the start, or did Luke call your number after he got appointed and say, "Hey,
Well,
put
a
my
bit
team
of
together"?
both because I had spoken with Henrik when he was soon after he was named captain because he wanted me to take charge of this like analytics and stats side of things, which I happily did. And then a few weeks later, Henrik asked me if I wanted to be a vice captain on top of it because he said it would be easier with the communication in the team and just being more involved, behind the scenes, which I was very happy with. And then when everything happened in the summer, then Luke was named captain, and then he called me the very next morning. I remember I was in the UK, he was in back in Florida. It must have been like probably 5 a.m. for him, and we just chatted for about half an hour, 45 minutes. I explained to him what I was doing for Henrik, and I said, if you want me to keep going, great. If not, you can find someone else, no problem at all. And straight away he said, no, absolutely, I want you to keep going and to be a vice captain. So I was very happy to keep going with Luke.
And then your background, just from an analytics perspective, is it just something that you've gotten into naturally as your career progressed, or have you
Yeah,
kind of always had this
well,
bent?
I studied engineering in college in Italy, so I always had an interest in numbers and stats and probabilities and all that stuff. And before turning pro, I thought if I could keep stats about my game, it would be very easy to understand where I need to improve, where I'm good enough, what I can do better in my game. So I developed my own kind of system to keep track of everything. And then obviously initially it was very, very simple, and then it just became more and more complex. And then at the end of 2019, just before COVID hit, a few guys on the European tour asked me if I could help them with stats, analytics, just understanding the game a bit better. So then I was in a way lucky that the COVID hit, because then during COVID I was able to basically build a brand new platform. I was doing all the coding and everything. And then after COVID, Fitzy was the first one that called me back and said, if it's available to to other players than yourself, I would like to give it a go and start with it. And he started using it. He loved it. He gave me a lot of good feedback and input on how to make it better and better. And then he started to talk very highly about me, about what I was doing. So more players came on board. He started to play really well, and then more players came on board, and then it became quite a big thing.
So I'm a huge fan of strokes gain. I'm a huge fan of analytics. I'm a couple part question here and saying I'm curious as to one, what your data looks like compared to what we see publicly, right? I mean, you mentioned you using data golf. I use data golf. Somehow I thought the US was going to win. Somehow you thought Europe was going to win. We're looking at the same information. I'm wondering how we got there, but you're kind of, inherently, I think there are some flaws in strokes gained, like
Yeah.
talking about course difficulty. And, if you're hitting more greens in regulation, chances are you might be leaving yourself more difficult putts than people that are missing and can chip to uphill spots. And all kinds of I'm kind of starting to fill in the blanks for you here, but I'm wondering what are flaws in information that we see, and how do you address that, or do you address that in kind of analytics that you do?
Yeah, so there's a few missing things in ShotLink. I would say the biggest one are you don't know where the players are aiming, both off the tee and into the greens. So if sometimes there's a back left pin, even when we watch on TV, there's a back left pin, and some players stiffs it, and he was probably going 3-4 yards right and a few yards short of it. He actually pulled it and got lucky, got away with it. So that's one thing that we track as well, which you cannot see on ShotLink, obviously. Other things is obviously wind direction, and the main one would be the brakes on the putts, where you miss the putts, why you miss the putts. So did you miss a putt because it was a bad stroke, bad speed, you overread the line, underread the line, whatever it was. So there's basically we get a lot of information from ShotLink, and then we add additional layers depending what each player wants to look at. And then you put everything together. You can some of the things we look at is for example, I had a chat earlier this year with Victor Hovland, and with his coach Joe Mayo, and Joe was saying, I think there's something wrong in Victor approach play. And I said to him, well, the only thing wrong is that Victor is just way too aggressive, because basically his dispersion is actually pretty small relative to his own targets. But then he fires at the pin pretty much every time he's on the fairway in position. And in the long run, he's going to hit a few more shots close, but then he's also going to be short-sighted a lot more often. And then on top of that, his short game wasn't exactly the best. So he was leaving himself difficult up and downs with a bad short game. It was just a deadly combination. And so, that obviously Victor improved his short game a lot. But even now, sometimes we just have a chat and he says, oh, yeah, I was trying to, playing boring golf. And I remember after the FedEx, after the last round of the FedEx, I think in the press conference, he mentioned that he was just trying to play boring golf. And I was like almost in tears, 6 months before. He was like, well, if I have a 7-iron from the middle of the fairway and the flag is 3 from the edge, I'm just going straight at the pin. And I'm like, not sure that's the best way.
From a data set perspective, I guess two-part question, does the DP World Tour run off of ShotLink as well, or is it a modified
We have a
version of
similar
that?
system, which is called IMG Arena.
Okay.
Which is basically the same, is a little bit less accurate on the greens. So then most of the times the players will edit their putting distances, but everything else is basically the same information. Yeah.
And then on that front, you're basically importing two different data sets for a lot of your players versus on the
Yes.
US side, they just have
Yeah.
a data set because it's coming straight
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
ShotLink.
Exactly. So it's it's very similar to what Data Golf does. We just do it a little bit more in depth. And then you have to adjust as they do for like strength of field and stuff like that, because when you compare, someone gaining 2 shots on the field in Europe is not the same as someone gaining 2 shots on the field at any PGA Tour event.
Yeah.
So
Solly's made that very clear to us over the last
Good.
few years.
Good to hear
Yeah, yeah.
validation of that. Nobody's arguing with me anymore all of a sudden. But
No. I mean, it's very, it's one of the things that sometimes I have an argument with the people saying, "Oh, the world ranking points, we should get more world ranking points in Europe." And it's like, well, when you look at the strength of field, it's perfect the way it is now. We've been, we've been spoiled for many years, to be honest, because we were playing some events in the Middle East in the beginning of the year where we will have 3 of the top 5 players in the world, and the winner get 50 points. But,
man, I thought this would feel better getting the validation on this. This was a campaign of mine for years, and I thought this validation would feel better than it does. But
100%.
going into the Ryder Cup, and I guess again multi-part question here, but how do you, as your team is starting to take shape, you probably have an idea of who some of the captain's picks are, but I would guess even up till the last month or so, the last couple of picks were not finalized. But as you're assembling those last picks, looking at the profile of your team, are you starting to think about how you're going to set this course up? Is that like part of the decision of taking Ludvig Aberg and Nikolai Højgaard going into saying like, all right, this coincides with, hey, we just took a visit there, or we're going to take a visit there, and players don't like the rough. We're going to end up cutting the rough down. Do these guys fit that profile? That's a pretty iterative process, but when did that start, and kind of when did you guys start thinking about how you want to set up the course and matching the team to that?
That's like 6 questions in one.
I this is how my brain works with the Ryder Cup, Eduardo. I
Okay.
had to brain dump on you.
So I'll start with Ludvig. Ludvig was always going to be a pick. Come on. No, I mean, Ludvig is obviously Ludvig. He came to play the last 2 events in Europe, and he finished top 5 in Czech. And I would say, even after Czech, before he won in Kran, he was probably nailed on in the team. He didn't know, and he played with Nico Kolsaerts and myself in Kran the first 2 rounds, the last counting event. And we thought, right, we're going to play with him and put him under some pressure. And he was 5 under through 6 on day 1, missing 2 10-footers in the first 6 holes. And I looked at Nico Kolsaerts walking off the 6th green, and I said, Nico, I think he's a bit uncomfortable this morning. We need to give him a chat. So no, I mean, Ludvig was crazy. But going back to the course setup is something that we started looking at more than a year ago. Obviously, out of the 12 players, probably 6 or 7 already a year before, unless something dramatic happens like an injury or a sudden loss of form. So we had our 6-7 guys, and we also knew 6-7 guys from the US team. So then you start, looking at possible options for the course setup based on those guys, which are most likely the guys that will play more matches as well. Like, someone like Rory, John, Victor. Not only they're in the Ryder Cup, but they're not going to play 2 or 3 matches. They're going to play 4 or 5 most likely. So then we started to have a look at that, and then we had like, again, similar to data golf, we had like percentages of the players making the team. So you have like a weighted average for the whole team, where someone like, Ludvig, maybe a year ago, he was at 5% of making the team, and someone like Rory was at 99% of making the team. So then you create a profile for the US, a profile for Europe, and all of a sudden magic happens, and we find out that we were slightly better outside 175 yards, which is the magic number. So then we started. I think that was one of the biggest things. We tried to make it a driving contest and like a mid-long iron contest. I mean, Rory almost spilled the beans a month before, because obviously he talked with Luke, he talked with myself, and he said, "Oh yeah, if it's a driving and mid-iron contest, we have a good chance." And we thought, "No, not now."
He told me that, and I was like, "Is he messing with me? Like, is he trying me to get me to float this
Yeah.
information so they can flip it on us? Is this
No.
gamesmanship here?" No, it was accurate.
The funny thing is, the other day when I was flying here to Madrid, I sent a small report to Luke, like after post-match analysis. And of all the shots we gained over the US, 92% were either off the tee or between 175 and 225 yards to the pin.
Wow.
So I thought
Wow.
we putted better. I thought we chipped better. But actually, the biggest difference was literally from the tee all the way to 175, which
What a
is,
validation.
yeah. I mean, we expected to be better. I would have never guessed we were going to gain so much on that distance range. But I guess we just, at the end of the day, our guys play some unbelievable golf. Especially our top guys were like in top form. And I mean, when you think that John, Rory, and Victor, they won 10.5 points out of 14 matches, and they never played together once. So that's a lot.
Yeah. So from a setup perspective, how do you take those learnings or those kind of, hey, this is our general theme. We want to make sure that they're hitting. Are you
Yeah,
looking
well,
at
a
hole
few things.
distances? Are you pinching certain things in?
Yeah, there's a few things. We played, obviously, we played the Italian Open there 3 times. So every year we were trying to change the height of the rough, maybe change a couple of tees. And then we were looking at where the players were gaining most of their shots. And when we played in May this year, so 4 months ago, at the end of the week, we had a look at the numbers, and all of a sudden, all the players that played well, they gained most of their shots outside 175 yards. So we thought, all right, this is the setup we want. And so we tried to replicate that. The problem is, in the summer in Rome, it can be very hot. So we just asked the greenkeepers not to cut anything down until we went for the practice trip. And we went for the practice trip, and it was way over the top. Like, the rough was, I have some pictures where the rough was like knee high, literally just off the fairway. But it was never going to be like that at the Ryder Cup. It's just that, we wanted to have a look. I mean, you can always cut it down. You cannot make it grow in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Soly was
I-
horrified.
I played it 2 days after the Italian Open finished. Like, we made the trip over specifically to be like, we want to see tournament condition as close as it'll be to the Ryder Cup. It's one of the most miserable golf experiences I've ever had. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, my legs were rashy at the end from all of the tall grass that I was in the whole time. And it played so completely differently once Ryder Cup time came around.
Yeah, I mean, the Ryder Cup, obviously, there was a lot of rough, but it wasn't nothing like Paris, where it was just a hack out. Like, you could still hit the green if you had like a short mid iron. But yeah.
So on a team perspective, were you trying to find other players, like find captain's picks that would sort of, because you've got a good idea that, hey, this is how we want to do it.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch, the majority of the team at this point they're going to gain strokes with long irons. They're good off the tee, that sort of thing. Are you going out and trying to identify other
Obviously.
captain's picks
Yeah,
that
it
fit
was
that
a
profile?
combination. Yeah, it was a combination of a few things. I would say we were obviously looking for ideally that kind of player. Then the other thing is we had a lot of very good foursome players. We didn't have a lot of fourball players. So like obviously Ludvig, Nikolai Højgaard, even Bob McIntyre to some extent. He's good in fourballs and not so good in foursomes. So we're trying to make sure that we had enough options for both formats. We were looking at whoever was playing best in the last few months. So someone like Seb Straka, he was having a great summer of golf. Both Nikolai and Ludwig, they played extremely well from middle of August onwards. So it was a combination of things, but obviously, yeah, you look at a bunch of different stuff.
You mentioned guys being good for foursomes and good for four ball. What makes those profiles fit? I cannot dive any harder into the Ryder Cup, and I still don't think I have any understanding of how you identify who those guys are. In your mind, how do you identify who's good at foursomes and who's good at four ball?
Again, so four balls is basically just making birdies. So whoever is making the most number of birdies is good in four balls. And then we had a little, not secret, but something that I'm not going to disclose to make sure that we can, two players that can make the same number of birdies, but then you want to kind of mix them up a little bit. So, and then in foursomes, it's a bit more complex. So I started to kind of develop a system where basically we could have, let's say, Rory playing with Tommy, and then Rory will hit the tee shot on the first. We know exactly how many times he's going to hit the fairway and how far it's going to be. So then from there, Tommy is going to hit the second shot, and we know his like dispersion and strokes gain from each distance range. How many times does he hit it inside 10 feet? And then Rory hits the putt, and then you just keep going. They basically play, you make them play 18 holes on a kind of a simulation, and then you get an expected score, and then you flip them. So all of a sudden, Tommy hits the first and Rory hits the second shot at the first. And then you do the same for all possible combinations. And we could do it. I mean, I think we were looking at like 25, 30 players. And all of a sudden you had some players that were very good in foursomes for different reasons. Like one player could be very good because he hits a lot of fairways. One player could be very good because on, I don't know, even holes, it's important to putt very well. So like he could be a great foursome player. For example, Ludwig was great because he's obviously unbelievable off the tee. And then if he was playing even, you could hide a little bit his weakness which is his approach play. So all of a sudden, him playing with Victor, you're basically giving Victor 10 yards longer off the tee, as many fairways as Victor hits, and then you got Victor hitting a club less into the greens, which is like he's deadly from 160, and then from 150 is even worse.
So in theory, there's good foursomes players for a particular golf course that doesn't necessarily translate to the next one. And if there's a rerouting of any kind of that golf course, it might also be a different equation, right? Like for President's Cup, I know you're not involved with that, but Quail Hollow, they rerouted a bunch of holes, and the 18th became the 15th, which was an odd hole versus even. Like that might play a factor in whether or not somebody is a good foursomes fit.
Yes, it won't shift massively, but it can definitely shift a little bit the odds and the numbers. Yeah, and then I think the important thing there is, especially for foursomes, but even fourballs, is that you want to have. I mean, it's not only on data. You want to have players that like to play with each other and like to spend time with each other. Even caddies that like to hang out with each other. Personalities fit. So if someone is someone that likes to talk a lot and the other guy just wants to stay quiet. I mean, if you notice, I think it was very noticeable in person, but I think even on TV, like our guys, they walked together a lot. They were like hugging each other on the first tee. They were speaking a lot with each other. They were just trying to be as close as possible to each other. And sometimes you would see pictures of two Americans on the tee, just 2 feet 2 feet from each other, just looking up. It was just a bit of a different vibe.
That's the eye test.
Yeah, that's where I still can't. I walk away from every one of these and be like, okay, this is why Europe wins. This is why Europe wins. And I still, you've played in a Ryder Cup, like you've been here for this. How does that team environment translate to playing better golf? Like, why is that, right? I mean, I can see it in my own eyes. I still struggle to explain why that is, though.
It's difficult to put into words. I think you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. Uh, you see, like especially the top guys in the team, they, I mean, they literally live for the Ryder Cup. Like even someone like Rory, on the Monday night, he gave we just had a bit of a chat after dinner with the whole team and the players, vice captains, and Luke. And Rory was trying to explain what the Ryder Cup means to him. And at the end of it, he was almost in tears. He was almost like he was so like ready for it, and he just wanted it so badly. And I told him on the Sunday after we won, I bumped into him on 18 when we were waiting for Shane to finish, and I said, Rory, I just couldn't believe how much this means to you, because obviously you still have the Masters to win, you want to win majors, I thought you wanted to win mostly majors. And he said, this is this year, this is the thing that I wanted the most, which from someone like him is like, it's powerful. So I think as when you're a rookie in that team room and you see someone like that is so motivated to play well, it just inspires you to play better golf. And then the other thing as well, I think, is that again, guys like Rory, John, I mean, if you walked in the team room any day of the week, it looked like John and Rory were best mates with Bob and Nikolai, and they probably saw each other 2 times before the week. But it was literally, having dinner together, and Bob was sitting at the table, Rory would go there and have a chat, and it's like, it's difficult to see.
I promise this next question is not about sour grapes. I promise this is not, okay? But I'm going to float this by you. If I'm looking back at past Ryder Cups, going back to 2006, home team blowout, 2008, home team blowout, 2010, very close. You were part of that Ryder Cup. 2012, obviously very close, but home team was blowing them out before a miraculous final day. 2014, home team blowout. 2016, home team blowout. 2018, home team blowout. 2021, home team blowout. 2023, home team blowout. You see what I'm getting at here. You've talked a little bit about some of the, we haven't actually gotten into some of the details of what you've done with course setup. I understand there's a little something about bunker rakes in there, which I want to pick your brain about too. But are we past the U.S. was a little stronger from? Are you grinning here as if you know what I'm talking about or not? That the U.S. was stronger from fairway bunkers, so that they were raked a little bit wider with wider grooves. Is that accurate?
No, you're close, but not.
Oh, okay.
Close, but not there.
Okay. Well, anyways, is it past time to give some of these advantages that come through course setup back to something more neutral? If we want to have a close competition, is it time? And again, I thought the setup was totally fair and fun. It promoted a fun style of golf. I did not think France promoted a fun style of golf, but this was fun and entertaining golf. So I'm fine with that, and it's not sour grapes. The U.S. does the same thing. That's all to say, like, are we better off with a closer to a neutral setup so you can't exacerbate the weaknesses of the other team in the spirit of having more close competitions in this event?
Yeah, I would say so. I think something has been done already, because up until I think Hazeltine, the home team could pick the pins and they could pick the tees. And now that's not the case anymore. So now both teams, they get the 5 pins that are going to use at the beginning of the week. They don't tell you which pins is singles, which pins is foursomes, but at least you know the 5 pins. And they tell you, let's say on the 8th hole, we could move the tee 1 tee up on certain days. On the 16th hole, we might move the tee back. So I think part of it has been taken away already. To be honest, I don't know. I mean, I think, yes, course setup is definitely an advantage, but I think there's a lot of other things like the crowds. Even I think in Rome, the crowds were very respectful, but they were also very loud. And I think there's something, again, when you're playing in front of a crowd that kind of loves you, it's almost like you cannot wait to make a putt and just celebrate and just get them going. And as an away team, when the home team starts to get off to a good start and then the crowds are behind us, it just becomes a very, very long week. So yes, course setup, I think it's there's something to it. And I mean, they could make it completely neutral, where the home team can go there, practice, do whatever you want, but you don't have a say in the height of the rough or the width of the fairway or the speed of the greens. or the rake in the bunkers. But
Well, that's kind of my point. Is there's enough home field advantage, I think, with all the things you just mentioned, that do you need the course setup on top of that, right? And maybe it's good. Somebody's got to do it first, right? You're
yeah,
just going to keep trading off. No one
but
wants to be the first one to do to sacrifice that advantage.
we can try a Bethpage and see what happens.
Well, it's also something too where the Americans are about to dig up Hazeltine and basically create the place in their image a little bit, right?
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
you know,
It's hard to pick what it's going to be like however many years in advance, though.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna say it's still a long time away, so
yeah.
it's a tricky exercise, but yeah.
how much did you communicate with guys prior and collaborate with them on, hey, this is who you may play with. This is who, and how much did you collaborate with the DP World Tour as far as, with the pairing that you mentioned at Kron or
Yeah,
um,
so
all the
um,
Wentworth stuff?
yeah, so DP World Tour has always been very good with us. So this is something I didn't know before being a vice captain. But once you're a vice captain, you basically choose the two players you play with every week until the Ryder Cup for the first 2 days.
That's
So I
wild.
mean, if you notice so I was named captain in May 22, and in the last 14 months, I only ever played with European players every single week, Thursday, Friday, every week. I think it's not so much to see how they play, but it's more like to get to know them a little bit more, spend some time with them. We organize like a countless number of dinners. Even like in Scotland, we had a massive dinner, but we did it a lot of times. And I think just playing with them again, it makes them a bit more comfortable. If they happen to be in the Ryder Cup team, they just know someone a little bit better, especially for the European guys, because you have to imagine that some of these guys that play mostly in Europe, again, they've only seen John and Rory and those guys 2, 3, 4 times in their life. I mean, another thing that Luke did, and he was very good with it. I think he was at the PGA, definitely at the PGA, maybe even at the US Open. He organized practice rounds between Rory with some of the guys and then John with some other of the guys, especially with the guys coming from Europe. Because I mean, John and Rory, they don't need to play with each other, but like John and someone like Nikolai Højgaard or Rory and Nikolai or Rasmus, whoever, even players that might not be in the team this time, but they might be in the team in 2 years' time. So we're just trying to, build it very much in the long run.
How does looking just at Rory as an example, because he's played in so many Ryder Cups at this point, I don't know what's going to come at your guys' camp. Is he going to play with a rookie Torbjorn Olesen, or is he going to show up and play with Tommy Fleetwood, who's been one of the best European Ryder Cuppers, at least it obviously was in Paris? How does it get decided? Like, all right, John Rahm, you're going to be playing with Nikolai Højgaard, the rookie here, and Rory, you're going to be kind of paired with another top gun this go around. How does that all come about, and what are those conversations like?
Yeah, so it's. I think that was the most fun part of the Ryder Cup of my Ryder Cup, and also the most difficult one, because obviously we started looking at the data and making sure we were looking at what were the best possible pairings and the worst possible ones that you just want to avoid. Then Luke, especially, he talked to the players and basically asked them, who would you like to play with, who you wouldn't like to play with. And I have to say, we're quite lucky because of our 12 guys. I think maybe only one or two that said, "Oh, I don't want to play with this guy or this guy." So we basically had no constraints, no obligations on that side. Because if you have all of a sudden, if you have a few guys that say, "I don't want to play with him, I don't want to play with him, I don't want to play with him," then it just all your options start to shrink very quickly. And then the other thing we looked at, we wanted to have everyone playing on Friday. So we needed to find a spot for everyone in the team.
So that was a
Uh,
conscious decision going into the week well
yeah,
beforehand. Like, hey, we definitely want everybody to play Friday. And is that
yeah,
just because you want to get everybody's feet wet? You want them to be comfortable
yeah. I
for the next
think
match out?
it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's difficult to judge someone just on the practice rounds or on the weeks before because I mean, the Ryder Cup is such a different animal to any other golf tournament. You want to see how they play, how they react in that environment, and I think having everyone on the course on the first day. If someone wasn't comfortable or was playing particularly bad, then you can see them on the second day. But if you don't play them on Friday, then you don't know how they're going to react on Saturday. So you're trying to guess on Saturday, which you don't want to do. And I think that was the original idea of this was Thomas Bjorn. I remember having dinner with him and Luke in Ireland, so like a month before, and he strongly suggested that everyone should be on the course at least once on Friday. And I think in hindsight, it was a great idea. So then you have that, and then you start asking the guys, and then all of a sudden you start looking at your possible. So obviously Rory, John, Victor are going to play 36 on day one, and then you start finding partners for them. You don't want to. We didn't want to pair them together to avoid the Tiger Field situation at Auckland Hills. I mean, 18 hole in match play, pretty much anyone can beat anyone. And if you put them together and you lose that point, it's like you almost lose 2 points.
Yeah.
So again, you try and split them, and then you start and find partners. We look at the ball situation, which is obviously very, very tricky in foursomes. Again, you have some guys like, we asked John, we said, John, what, do you have any preference for golf ball for, and he was, just give me 10 balls on the range. I hit shots with TrackMan. I'll be fine with it. I can play it in holes. I'm like, thanks, John.
Isn't that reduced though as well with the new? Because can't you put any ball in play on any tee that you want from the start of each hole? Like you don't need to do odds evens anymore.
Yes, but then again, if someone hits it in the rough and you lay up, then you have to hit with the wrong ball. And then other guys were like, I remember there was one guy in particular who I'm not gonna name him, but there was one guy that was switching balls just before Ryder Cup, a couple of weeks before. So that was a bit of an issue, a headache. And then at Wentworth, we asked Ludvig if he could hit a few shots with this ball. And all of a sudden, Ludvig driver numbers are, 2-6 spin, launching at 12. And that ball was launching at 12 and spinning 3-8, 3-9. So all of a sudden, Ludvig was losing 35 yards of the tee. So we said, right, this is not an option. So you have, I mean, even if they can switch ball at some, when the ball is so dramatically different to what you're playing, then that's not an option anymore. And so you look at all the possible combination and constraints, and then eventually we wanted to start fast, so we decided to go basically all out in the morning and just put our best four best pairings out in the morning, which paid off pretty good, I would say. And then obviously you just keep going.
How much did it change up, like versus what you thought it was going to be on Saturday? How much did you based on how people played or surprises or anything like that?
Yeah, basically on Friday we had the plan basically set in stone the weekend of Ireland, so 2.5 weeks before. And we just had a couple of options in case player A is not playing great, we can swap him, and in case player B is not playing great, we can, and still have everyone on the course on Friday, which was the biggest concern. And then for Saturday, Luke was very keen on making sure that maybe John was rested for Sunday singles, because at Whistling Straits he played 5 matches and he said he was very tired on Sunday. So if we had the option to rest someone, John was always going to be the first one of our big players to rest, and that's what happened on Saturday. And then again, Saturday, I mean, after Friday started, the morning was always going to be exactly the same. We just switched the order a little bit. And then in the afternoon, obviously John rested. We had a couple of different pairings that we could kind of switch with each other. So it wasn't, I have to say, I mean, we had to hand in the pairings at 11 a.m. For the afternoon session. And it just took us, we always met at like 10:15, 45 minutes before, with Luke and the other vice captain in a corner on the golf course. And it was, every time it was like a 5-minute discussion, and it was pretty easy. And the same thing at night, like, when they finished, I think we had an hour from when they finished playing before we could hand in before we had to hand in the pairings for the next morning, and it literally took us 5 minutes on Friday night. So everything. The great thing with Luke is that I'm quite similar. Like, he's very well organized. He likes to think about a lot of different options and possibilities well ahead. So even with the players, like, there was a general feeling that everything was very well managed. Everything was, it was calm. There was a reason behind everything, and I think as a player, it just puts you in a good place.
How do you determine the order specifically for the team portions, right? Are you trying to avoid certain American pairings? Are you trying to match up with certain pairings? Are you trying to guess what they're doing at all? Or how do you come up with who goes out first, second, third, fourth?
I don't want to sound too.
Oh, come on.
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
can tell you. No, I don't. I
Okay.
don't want to sound too cocky, but I remember telling Luke on, I want to say Wednesday. I said, Luke, I have a feeling Cantley and Sander are going to be last foursome, and Scotty and St. Burns are going to be first foursome. So having said that, John was always going to be our first foursome with Tyrrell. And then we said, all right, we send Rory and Tommy out last, because we felt if you could beat Scotty and Sam Burns, that's a big point to get. And if you could beat Patrick and Sander, that's a massive point to get. So we literally tried to get those two, and we got them, and we beat them both, and yeah, it was a dream start. But yeah, it's and then same thing, like they probably guessed the same. Like, it's always the first and the last foursomes of the first session are always very, very strong. So it was always going to be either or. And then obviously they rested JT and Spieth, and I could bet a lot of money. I don't bet, but I could bet a lot of money that JT and Spieth was going to be first four balls out in the afternoon, and they got Victor and Tyrrell. So I mean, it's I think there's a bit of a guessing game, but you can kind of predict what's going to happen. And then I think, most people could see John going out first in the singles versus Scotty. That was almost a gimme. And then after that, it becomes a bit more. I think when you're behind in the singles, you want to front load, like put all your strong players out first, hoping to at least get to the end of it. And that's pretty much what they did.
You're muted, TC.
Yeah.
Sorry. My son just got home from school. He was yelling outside. So for singles, you basically said, hey, we want to have a pretty well balanced.
Yeah, I mean, for singles, the thing is, so the US were always going to put their strong players out first. First 3-4 players were going to be their best player, the player playing the best. You could hide like John, Rory, and those guys and get them easier matches. But all of a sudden, if you lose the first 4, and then it happens that John or Rory lose a game, then you're losing 5 or 6 games already. So I think the best way is always to try and, especially when you're ahead, to try and cover them up and make all the matches as close as possible. And then eventually you're going to get points somewhere. Like, if it's all very balanced matches, it's very difficult that you're going to lose 4 in a row. So that's what we did.
Any big surprises that the Americans sent out where you're just like, man, I did not see that coming, or I did not see that team, or I did not see that, that pairing going out first?
I was, I mean, with all the respect, because I'm a big Jordan Spieth fan, but I thought the way he played in 4 balls on Friday afternoon, I was a little surprised to see him going out in foursomes on Saturday morning. But then again, I only saw him playing 18 holes that afternoon, so maybe he was playing great, and then he just didn't play well that afternoon. Obviously, he didn't play very well on Saturday morning either. But I think it's too easy to judge someone from the other side of the fence, and you never know the full side of the story, so it's difficult.
Any pairings that you would have you were shocked that you didn't see from them? Where you're like, hey man, I thought these two guys, from the US, like, man, I thought these two guys would have played beautifully
I
together.
thought, well, obviously JT always played with Jordan. I thought JT was going to get at least a game with Ricky, because obviously I know they're good friends, and it seems like they do their pairings a little bit more based on like friendships and people they get along with. But I think Ricky wasn't, from everything I've heard. I've spoken with Ricky and he seemed okay, but from what I've heard, he wasn't feeling great. So maybe they would have liked to play him a bit more and they couldn't. I don't know.
That's what that we spent Friday night on the show being like, I don't know who the 8 guys are on the US right now. I mean, they had such a bad showing on that first day, and who knows what the health situation was. I'm curious, total hypothetical here, but I mean, the JT captain's pick was a huge controversy in the US, a huge debate for the majority of the year. How would you have looked at that if you were a US team captain of some way of, obviously the short-term form, not very good at all, not a ton of signs of it turning around yet, a player that I think was written in pen as being on this team and almost could have had as bad of a season as possible and still made the team. It just was a huge debate of, hey, do you take a hotter player or go with a guy who's got this track record but playing poorly? How would you look at that, or how would you have broken down that scenario specifically?
Well, I think JT has always been very good in the Ryder Cups. And as I said before, Ryder Cup is very, very different from any other golf tournament. I mean, we had a similar situation I wasn't involved in the team, but in 2018, when Sergio got picked, Sergio had one of his worst years of his career, I would say. But then he showed up in the Ryder Cup and he was the usual Sergio. And to be honest, JT, again, I followed him the first afternoon when he was playing against Victor and Tyrrell, and he was definitely the best of the two. Between him and Jordan, he played much better than Jordan on that afternoon. And he had a pretty decent Ryder Cup, JT, because he won his single, he halved that game. I mean, so I don't think it was as controversial as some people wanted to make it look. I mean, it's always difficult when you get down to the peaks. I mean, we had a similar thing. Like 3 months away, we thought, all right, we're struggling to get 12 guys, that could play at a good level in this Ryder Cup. And then when the time came to make the picks, all of a sudden we had a couple too many. And unfortunately, there's always someone that is going to get the short end of the stick, which, in the US case, it was obviously Keegan, I guess. He was the first big one out. But, it's so difficult. I mean, everything is so close these days that, he might have picked Keegan and won and looked like a legend, and then he picked JT and then he lost, and now everyone is saying, oh, he shouldn't have picked JT. But I think there's more to it than the picks.
Yeah, it was really tricky. We did a total hypothetical of, like, if it was like JT versus Ludvig, obviously a total hypothetical, but like an up and coming talent that, a total, what do you do there was a lot harder question, I think, than a Keegan that you kind of know who that guy is at that point. But obviously it didn't quite work out.
Real quick
Go ahead.
on Ludvig, we've made it 45 minutes in here, so I feel like I can ask at some point. Like,
Come on.
at what point did that enter your mind? And then at what point did that feel like a logical, like reasonable expectation that he could be on the team?
So true story. Again, May 22, I'm in Rome and we're there with Henrik and Thomas Bjorn, where I was going to be officially named vice captain the following day. And we were there as well to have a look at the golf course, start thinking about things. And we're having dinner, and I think it was Thomas that said, he asked me, is there anyone in your stats that you see up and coming and that might have a chance to play in Rome? And obviously he thought I was going to say something playing in Europe on DP World Tour. And I said, well, Thomas, there's this Swedish kid that is playing in college that he might have a chance. And he looked at me like I was, smoking weed and said, what? I'm like, yeah, Thomas, this guy, remember the name, he might have a chance. So we leave it there. He just laughed at me. And then late January this year, so 9 months ago, Ludwig comes to play as an amateur in Dubai, Desert Classic. And I saw his name on the entry list, and I, as a vice captain, I raised my hand and I said, that's my guy for Thursday, Friday. And he shows up. I don't know if you know the golf course at the Emirates, but like it's a typical desert course, pretty cold in the morning. The ball doesn't go very far. And he hit the tee shot on the first hole, the tee shot on the second hole, and I was sold. Like literally, I turned to my caddy and I said, if this guy is not in Rome, there's something wrong here. He shot the easiest 65 you'll ever seen. And I
Yeah.
finished playing and I walk on the range and there's Thomas sitting in a corner on the range. And he looks at me and he's smiling because obviously he knows what I'm about to tell him. And before I can even say anything, he tells me, "Oh, it's only one round. Stop it. Don't even start. It's only one round." I'm like, "Yeah, it's only one round, Thomas, but I've seen enough golf in my life and I'm telling you, this kid is different." Okay, we'll see. Anyway, he doesn't play well in Dubai, finishes, makes the cut, but finishes at the bottom. Then he has a decent week at Bay Hill, decent week at Valspar, I think. And then I started spending more and more time with Luke. And I said, Luke, the first time you go to the US, you got to play with this kid. Because if he's not in this Ryder Cup team, he will be in the next one. So just keep an eye on him. So Ludwig turns pro and he plays with Luke in Detroit, I want to say. So the first week we pair him with Fitzy and Tyrrell Hatton. The PGA Tour was kind enough to ask us, who do you want him to play with? And he goes, okay, let's give him two Ryder Cup players. And both of them text me literally Thursday night saying, oh, where's this kid coming from? We're like, Billy Foster. So Billy caddies for Fitzy. And Billy Foster, I think he caddied in the last 15 or 16 Ryder Cups. So he's seen everything from Sevi all the way Faldo Langer all the way to Rory and these guys. And I think he texted Luke that Friday night saying, Luke, we need to keep an eye on this guy. So obviously everyone is raving about him. And then Luke plays with him in Detroit the following week. And I think Ludwig shoots, playing with Luke, he shoots 65, 67, and is like one of the lead after 2 days. So I texted Luke back and said, Luke, how was it? Is it quite good? And I think he replied something of, I've never seen anything like it. And I said, so where we are now with him being in the team. And obviously he said this as a joke, but he said, I've already asked him the size of the shirts and what kind of bed does he want. But I mean, I think he was still laughing at the time. He was saying, oh yeah, he's good, but we'll see what happens. And then he started playing really well. And then he came over to Europe, finished top 5 in Czech. And then, I remember even in Czech, he played with my brother. Francesco had just been named a vice captain 2 weeks before. And he asked to play in Czech with Ludwig and Nikolai Højgaard. So Francesco was all day 40 to 50 yards behind them. And he comes at dinner, and I've been talking to Ludwig to Francesco for 3-4 months, saying, you won't believe how good he is. So he comes at dinner and he looks at me and he said, you've been busting my balls for 4 months about Ludwig. I was ready to give it all back to you tonight. And he said, unfortunately, I can't because I've never seen anything like it. So it was like, off the tee, again, we're talking like him, like he's the next Tiger Woods. He's not the next Tiger Woods, but off the tee, it's something that it's difficult to witness, to imagine if you haven't witnessed it. And again, in a team format, to play with someone like him in foursomes. When we ask the guys, who do you want to play with? I think I want to say at least 10, but possibly 11 guys say, oh, can I have a game with Ludwig? Yeah, of course.
It's just less variables, right? Like you're playing out of the middle of the fairway, 340.
You just wait on the tee and you see this bomb 325 down the middle of the fairway. And I would like to play with him. I can probably win a game with him.
His floor is just so ridiculously high. If he gets the iron play and the rest of it, even if he has hot weeks, we saw it. He almost won BMW and obviously won Cron. It's remarkable.
He's such a good kid too. Of like, he's got a good head on his shoulders. Like he's already improved his chipping immensely. It seems like this year.
And then to go, he plays Ryder Cup, and obviously I think he struggled a little bit with the importance of the event, the situation, the atmosphere. He wasn't the Ludwig that I saw 2-3 weeks before, you could tell. But is going to be very helpful in 2 years' time if he qualifies for Bethpage. He's already done it before, and Bethpage is going to be that on steroids. I've lost what I was going to say. Can't remember. I was wanting to say something about Ludwig again, but anyway. But yeah, it's he's just that good, and yeah, he will play, as Luke said, he might play 8, 10 Ryder Cups.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it
yeah,
seems like too, there's such a, between him and Nikolai and, Rasmus coming
yeah,
and then Adrian Dumont Chassart, like
yeah,
there seems like there's a good groundswell of young talent to choose from coming up.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think we have a lot of young up and coming players, and yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, this time we had a very young team, obviously, because I think the oldest guy was Rosie, and then other than him, all the others were like at the most in their mid-30s. So it's a very young team, and there's a few young up and coming talents. So I think we're in a good place. I mean, Bethpage is going to be extremely difficult, but you never know.
What was the team room like Saturday night after a controversial finish to that? We have the Cantlay situation, we have the Joe LaCava situation, we have. I understand Mr. McElroy was maybe a little emotional about the whole situation, which we saw some evidence of. What was Saturday night like heading into Sunday singles?
Well, I would say what Joe did on the 18th green, like he couldn't have done anything better for us. Because I mean, if he doesn't do anything and we just lose the match, and we go back and we're a bit deflated and we're a bit down because we lost the first session since the start of this Ryder Cup, and at the same time you have was it a 5 point lead? Yeah, 10.5 to 5 point lead. So you can start thinking, oh yeah, we just need 4 points, whatever. It might be a little bit of a tricky situation. I think what Joe did, I mean, we walked back into the locker room, not even in the team room in the hotel, just in the locker room at the course. And everyone was like so motivated and angry and saying, right, this is so good, because then tomorrow we want to win the session. We want to give them a proper beating in the single session. If Joe didn't do what he did, I think everyone was a bit almost sad and a bit tired, and we just gone back to the hotel. But like for 10 minutes, everyone was like, right, tomorrow I'm going to win my point. I'm going to win my point, and we're going to give them a proper beat up, which I think is the right. When you have a 5 point lead, it's the right attitude is to go into the singles and try to win the singles. And I think Joe gave us a lot of fuel for that Sunday.
Did you ever get even a little bit nervous on that Sunday with looking up and seeing a little bit of red on the board?
I think I was a little bit nervous between. I think the worst time was when John was one down playing the last. I was a few games behind with Tyrrell. I think Tyrrell was on 12 when John was playing the last. And I thought, wow, we really need this half a point from John to start getting closer. Then John got his half a point. Tyrrell played a great back nine against Brian Harman, and he won his game on 16. And I think when Tyrrell won his game on 16, we only needed half a point. And yes, we were on. I think only Tommy was one up. Then we had one down and 2 all square, but it was only half a point out of 4 matches. So at some point, something was going to happen, and eventually it did with Tommy. But it was, I have to say, it was a little bit too close for comfort. Yes.
There was that one moment when Tommy was only one up, and Bob McIntyre went down to only one up over Clark in those last two. That was like, well, the U.S. had to have both of them, but
yeah, Bob was all square.
it got to all square at one point. There was a
Part on
moment they were
14, yeah.
both only one up at the same time, and it was like,
Yes.
oh man, I mean, if there's going to be some
was close.
slippage, yeah, I mean that's what happened at Medina. I mean, it was like, okay, well, I mean, not all of this stuff is going to happen, and it did, and who knows if it's ever going to get flipped. But so what is? I know you don't have a crystal ball on this, but what does the future look like for you as an involvement in this event in terms of? Do you see yourself as a head captain in the near or distant future?
No. Head captain, absolutely not. I don't think I have the CV. I don't have the, I didn't have the career to be captain. But if whether I don't know whether Luke is going to be the next captain or someone else. If they want me to be involved again in helping the team with the stats, whether as a vice captain, whether just as a stats guy, I'll be very happy to. I mean, I think as a European, anytime you can get involved in the European Ryder Cup team, whether it's as a water boy or whatever, I'll do it.
I don't think you need a CV to be head captain. That like you guys have disproven that. I'm not going to buy that part. But if I appreciate your humbleness, but I wouldn't eliminate yourself. Go ahead, TC.
And it's crazy too, like just the way that like I played with Rory at BMW Championship in the Pro Am, and like just the way that he talks about you and like the respect that you've garnered from the guys in that team room, both vice captains and players, is absolutely remarkable. How did the decisions get made? Like I know much has been made of the task force here in the States. Is there kind of a core group of guys that just makes the decision? Is it made in concert with the DP World Tour? Like how does the
For
captain's
the
decision?
captain,
Yeah.
so usually I think that we have like a let's call it a committee or something, which is Guy Kinnings, which is like Ryder Cup Europe director. Then we have Keith Pelly. We have, I think, David Howell, who's the chairman of our PAC, our tournament committee. And then I think it's the last three captains. So it's like a group of 5-6 people, and then they will meet in the next few months. Usually we announce the captain before the end of January, I would say, in normal years. Then I think 2 years ago, with all the live thing going on, there was a bit of a delay. So I guess before the end of January, we'll hear something, but there's no exact deadline or anything, and there's not like a voting process. I think it's just more of a discussion, and then they agree on someone, and they ask him.
We'll get you out of here on this then. What, as previously mentioned, the home teams have definitely dominated this event. How does Europe flip it? Rory was quite confidently stated that Europe is going to flip it at Bethpage. That's going to be one psycho environment. I know he knows that, but how do you flip it? As I see it right now, it's playing at home versus playing on the road are two totally different things. How would you evaluate what Europe has to do to flip that?
Yeah, I mean, as Rory said, winning an away Ryder Cup these days is probably the most difficult feat in golf for sure, and probably in sports, I would say. How do you flip it? I don't know. I'll tell you in 2 years, hopefully. It's difficult. I mean, you have to go in with the right mindset for sure, because if you don't go in with the right mindset, it's going to be a very long week. We had Djokovic in our team room on the Thursday night, and he spoke for 10-15 minutes to the team, with Luke, with everyone. And he gave us a couple of good ideas. Like, obviously, he's basically played his whole career in tennis with the crowds rooting against him. And he had a couple of good tips that I think will come very handy in Bethpage. But as I said, I think you have to embrace the environment. If you start moaning about the crowds and the booing and everything, you're just setting yourself up for a beating. So I think
for Bethpage, how do you see the course being set up? Similar to how we've seen it for the majors there?
Well, I guess I've never been at Bethpage, but I've seen the shuttling data for events and stuff. It looks like you cannot make it like a birdie fest like they usually try and make in the US. So I know it might be a slightly different Ryder Cup, but then on the other hand, you got Adare Manor in 27, which is as an American golf course as you may get. Like, it's wide, long, runoff areas everywhere. So I know we might win a Bethpage, and then maybe we change the venue for Adare Manor, or we do something dramatic to the golf course.
TC was complaining about the setup at Bethpage before the Marco Simone Ryder Cup even happened.
It's just like a bunch of straight holes. The greens are so flat. They're all kind of perched up. There's a couple bunkers in front of them. It's pretty unspectacular in my opinion.
I don't know. It's good to have my mind off the course set up for a while. We spent so much time looking at every possible detail. Yeah. It'd be nice in a way to just go there and play what you get, and it's going to be fine. I mean,
last question.
Well, I was going to say the bunker. As long as the bunker raking isn't crazy at Bethpage, the US is going to win.
What's wrong with this bunker raking? I don't understand.
I had heard from a very good source that I thought you had told this person that the rake bristles were wider than standard rakes. Huh. I'll tell you the name of this person as soon as we hang up. He literally told me that, but okay. Anyways, go ahead.
Dodo, what's one example? Just like we've heard about the video that Luke showed to each team member. What's another example of Luke's leadership that just you think sums him up really well? Either attention to detail or
Yeah,
just
I
something
could
that
come
really
up.
speaks to him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so many things. Like, well, to start with the opening ceremony speech. Like, I was sitting next to Francesco. Luke was on the side, and we had this. They have this screen in front of them, like 20 yards in front, with the speech that they're basically reading the speech. And obviously, when Zach did his speech, he had the phonetics for the Italian words. So when he said, I think he said grazie and buonasera, he had a couple of words. And then when Luke steps up, we're looking at the screen and we saw like a couple of full sentences written in proper Italian with the Italian spelling. And I look at Francesco, we look at each other thinking, right, this is a mistake. This is panic. And Luke looked at that and just started reading in perfect Italian. Like the pronunciation, everything was perfect. And the crowds understood it. And I mean, that was one up Europe already straight away, 10 seconds into his captaincy. So, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, the videos were amazing. I mean, I'm not a very emotional person and I was almost in tears. Poor Jose Maria. Jose Maria was crying, I think. I think he spent 30% of the week crying because of,
Me too.
I mean, yeah, but like in the locker room, there was this Sevi thing. I guess you've seen it on social media
Yeah.
where they hang the Sevi shirt that they used at Oak Hill in his last Ryder Cup. And we have this nice picture of, I mean, we went in there on Tuesday morning, the first time we get to the golf course all together. And then we go out on the range, on the putting green, warming up, and no one can see Chema Olazabal. So we try and find him, and then eventually someone goes in the locker room and he's still in front of Sevi's locker, crying like a baby, and he just couldn't stop. And it's like, so I mean, going back to Luke, I think, I mean, so many things. I mean, the biggest thing is the amount of time he spent doing all this, like from learning Italian. I mean, learning Italian. I mean, he downloaded Duolingo, an app on his iPhone, and I think he had the week of the Ryder Cup. I think he got to 290 consecutive days doing the Duolingo. I mean, you try and do anything for 290 consecutive days, eventually you're going to break your string. But, so again, motivational videos. I mean, he had a very cool thing, which was his own idea in our team room. We had like, as a Ryder Cup player, you get a replica of the trophy. Whether you win or lose, you just get, for appearance, you get a replica of the trophy. And usually you get it at the end of the week. And his idea was, I'm going to give it to the guys at the beginning of the week. We're going to have a nice display in the team room with the 12 Ryder Cups replica for the players. And there's going to be one gap in the middle. And every time you walk in the team room, you look at the gap and you think, right, at the end of the week, we need to fill the gap. And then obviously at the end of the week, he comes in with a Ryder Cup and puts it in the gap. And it was just amazing. But it's, I mean, so many things. I mean, again, it was difficult to get Olazabal involved, and he called John, he called Olazabal, he called John again, and he said, John, just make sure that Chema comes on board, and he got it. Like, I mean, a number of things that were just I would have never thought of some of those details, and he did it. I mean, I think communication was fantastic with all the players. Like, everyone knew exactly going into the week, they knew what they were going to do on Friday, what was the possibilities on Saturday, everything. Like, even up to the practice trip. Like, before we went on the practice trip, Luke sends us like a WhatsApp text, very long text, where we had the exact schedule for the practice trip, which is fine. And then he said, the week of the Ryder Cup, I want to have this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. And it was like every 30, 40 minutes, there was something going on. And everything was already planned. It was like, it just gives you, as a player, it just gives you a sense, again, of calmness and of like, if my captain, if my leader is so well organized, motivated, is up for it, then everything is going to be much easier. So I think, again, going back to the beginning, I think Luke was he was the true MVP of the week, and I'm, deep down, I'm really hoping he's able to do it again, because it's I think the players will love him.
You made me feel weirdly good about 2025, because I don't think Tiger needs Duolingo to practice English up in front of the 2025 Ryder Cup. So I think if that's what it takes, I think the Barrack is going to be a great position. So
That's that.
Man,
Tiger might bust out an Irish accent or something.
Yeah.
So, hey, Edoardo, this one's up there, man, for me in terms of interviews and insight into the Ryder Cup. I know we did a great one with Paul McGinley a couple years ago that was just like painted the picture for why Europe's had so much success in this event, and why I tend to like it for a lot of the reasons that you've talked about today. I still am kind of determining why I'm rooting for the U.S. in these things, but the way you guys treat it as a competition and the team aspect of it, I find so fascinating. And to hear, like, especially hear Jose Maria's, that description of what he thinks of this event is kind of what I think about it just as a sports fan. So thank you so much for your time and sharing some insights and some look into it. And we'll dig back into this bunker thing once we hang up, but we greatly appreciate your time and hope to do it again sometime.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great fun. Thank you.